Okay, our next speaker is going to be Todd Vaughn.
The first slide, please. First of all, I want to thank the organizers of ASK for allowing me to speak here, and I want to thank all the panel members here who, although I disagree with most of them, in fact, almost all of them, I have great respect for all of them. I got about 140 slides to go through, so I want to get started real quick. And I'm starting to lose my voice because I'm starting to get a little bit of a cold, so if you just bear with me. What I want to talk about is the trajectory of the single bullet theory, which I think has gotten a bad rap over the years. And I want to preface that with something that I'm not a forensic pathologist, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not an engineer, but what I do here, I don't think you really have to be in any of those things to go through this. So the first thing I want to show is some slides that depict how the trajectory has been shown over the years by critics and researchers who at one time, believe it or not, I was one myself. And I can't go through in every detail in every one, but believe me, there's many errors in these. I think that some of the errors are the bodies are not accurately drawn, the limousine is not accurately depicted, and I'll just go through those real quick. Maybe. It's probably the other remote. It's a different one.
Do the next slide. Can you do it?
Okay, if you look at all these, and we can go through these. I think there's serious problems with all these. The bodies are not really accurate diagrams of human anatomy, human bodies. In several instances, the limousine in the drawings you see will not be to scale. These just do not reflect the way the limousine was and the way the bodies were in this car. So what I've done is I want to go through and show you my own analysis of the trajectory, the feasibility of the trajectory of the single bullet theory. First of all, I accept that the autopsy photographs and x-rays are genuine. They were looked at by some of the leading experts of the House Select Committee on Assassination, leading photographic experts and forensic anthropologists, and they all concluded that they were unaltered, unretouched, and they were in fact the x-rays and photographs of President Kennedy. This is the Fox photo. The wound that I believe is an exit wound is located within this incision. Now, if you go and look at photographs of President Kennedy at Love Field, you can see where that wound would be. That wound is going to be below the collar line and behind the knot of the tie. This is President Kennedy's shirt, which has corresponding exit defects. His tie, which had a nick on the left side, and that's going to be very important in the next slide. If you look at this photograph of President Kennedy in the limousine, you can note that as he turns his head to the right, his entire collar and tie rotate with him to the right. And I believe that when you see the trajectory analysis I've done, that this allows the bullet to exit and nick the left side of the tie. Also note the suit coat position, and note where his arm is, and note that he is to the extreme outside edge of the limousine. In fact, I think the underside of his chest right here is probably even pressing up right up against that side. There's several other photos that show this. The wound in the back, of course, much discussion over this because the wound in the clothing is 5 inches below the collar line. And when the FBI did a reconstruction in Dealey Plaza, an agent wore a jacket that had a marking on it showing where those holes were. But when you go and look at photographs of the motorcade, I think this is very important, and this question came up yesterday. You go look at photographs throughout the motorcade, and you can see that President Kennedy's suit coat is hunching up through the entire motorcade. Well, that's all right. You can look at this and see for yourself. I don't think there'll be any question about this. That one's a little hard to see, but I guarantee you that is hunching up. And I don't think there's any question about it in this one here. This is the Croft 3 photograph, which is taken 3 seconds before I think the president was hit in the back. It's at frame 161 of the Zapruder film, and it's a little underexposed, but if you look very carefully, you can see that the right side of the suit coat is hunched up. I want you also to notice how President Kennedy is sitting, with the shoulders a little rounded, his head a little bit forward. And notice the height of President Kennedy in relation to Governor Connally. Governor Connally was sitting in a jump seat and was significantly lower than President Kennedy. This is the autopsy face sheet, which a lot of discussion about this, showing the back wound apparently in the back. And Dr. Vaughan and Humes have said this is simply a diagram and not meant to exactly position the wound, and what you have to do is take the measurement next to this. And I went back and I looked at Oswald's autopsy face sheet, and I looked at the wounds here, and I know that you have the same thing occurring here. You have, Dr. Rose has drawn the locations of some of the wounds on the face sheet, and you see that some of them are the same level, but when you look at the measurements, they're completely different. So I think that this is a possible explanation for some of this controversy over this. And as far as the probing of the wound, both Dr. Humes and Dr. Fink said that they inserted a probe into this back wound and they could not get this probe to go through. They thought the bullet stopped short. But if you look at the musculature, the underlying musculature of the back, you see there's numerous muscles that overlap and override each other. And depending on how the orientation is when you're hit, if President Kennedy, as I believe, was struck when his arm is up, when you put him on the autopsy table and his arm down, you get a change of the orientation of those muscles. And in fact, in the autopsy of Robert Kennedy, Dr. Noguchi, when trying to probe one of the wounds in Robert Kennedy's back, encountered the same problem. He could not get the probe to go through until he raised Robert Kennedy's right arm, and then the probe went through. And this is his grand jury testimony to that effect. This is the X-ray of President Kennedy. I think it's important that it shows no bony damage, with possibly, according to some of the experts, a graze of the tip of the right transverse process of the first thoracic vertebra. President Kennedy had a bruise at the top of his right lung, which, as you see here, comes to the level of about T1. This is the left lateral photograph, and I'm going to show you an analysis similar to the one Dr. Artwell did yesterday during the case closed panel, but I assure you that I did this completely independent of him. In fact, I had this done before I even met him. I met him in April, and I think it's amazing we came to basically the same conclusion. Okay, I think that when you turn the photograph like this, that this is how President Kennedy is sitting in the motorcade. And I think when you look at photographs of the motorcade, you can see that I think this is correct. You can see his shoulders are rounded, his head is erect. And as you go through these photographs, you can see this. Quite clearly here, his shoulders are rounded, he's leaning forward slightly, his head is erect. You can see that clearly here, I believe, also. Also here, and also know how much lower Governor Connally is than President Kennedy. This is a photograph from Gary Savage and Rusty Livingston's book, JFK First Day Evidence, which they graciously gave me a copy. And I think this one clearly shows the way President Kennedy was sitting in his car. And I think this is consistent with the F4 photograph. So when you look at the F4 photograph, you can see where the tracheotomy incision is right there. The problem is you cannot see the back wound. But what you can see is the President's ear, the height of the ear, and you can see these folds. So what I did was, realizing that the head is tilted backward somewhat, I measured the distance of the ear from top to bottom. And I also measured the distance from the back wound to the most inferior fold. And I found that that distance is the same. And when you go to the left lateral photograph and apply this, you can approximate, and I stress approximate, where that wound is down in the back. And then you can plot out a possible trajectory for that. And overlaying the suit coat and the shirt, and you can see how that can accommodate that trajectory and how you can get those holes in those clothing that way. And this trajectory is 20 degrees, exactly 20 degrees. And where I believe President Kennedy is struck, the trajectory back to the depository is exactly 20 degrees. You can apply, then when you take this angle, you can apply this to some of the motorcade photographs. And this is an interesting photograph of President Kennedy. You can see the shape of his back, which corresponds, I think, quite well to how he's in the F4 photograph. You can see that he does have an overdeveloped set of trapezius muscles. And when you do the same thing with the same measurements, and you approximate the position of the tracheotomy incision, you can see you get the same downward trajectory. And I did an overlay on this photograph here, where I do the same thing with the same trajectory at 20 degrees, and if that bullet strikes here, exits here, that bullet is on a direct course for Governor Connolly's back wound. And also here. Another important thing is the position of Governor Connolly in relation to President Kennedy. It's always said that he was sitting directly in front of him, and I don't think, while I agree he's in front of him, I don't think he's directly in front of him. And I think that these series of photographs will show that. I think you can see here that President Kennedy is to the extreme right side of the car. Governor Connolly is a little bit more to the inside of the car. In fact, that's how the jump seat was laid out. President Kennedy's arm is over the side of the car, while Governor Connolly's is inside the car. Another photograph, I think, that's showing President Kennedy to the right side, Governor Connolly to the inside. Another one here. These photos, I think, are remarkable because I think you can see both President Kennedy to the extreme right side, Governor Connolly certainly more to the center of the car. And this one, I think, is perhaps the most important. Almost taken from directly above, looking straight at the limousine. And when you draw a line parallel to the right edge of the limousine and draw a line parallel to that from President Kennedy's throat, you can see that that line passes Governor Connolly's right shoulder. And a hypothetical trajectory can accommodate those wounds. As I'll show, I think President Kennedy is shot when he's looking to the right. And if he turns his head to the right, as I showed in the other photograph, his collar and his suit coat and everything will rotate to the right, and all that will line up. This is frame 154, I believe. President Kennedy is looking to the right, or to the left, I'm sorry. Governor Connolly is looking to the left, and Mrs. Kennedy is looking to the left. And here, very swiftly, we see some changes start to occur. President Kennedy begins to look to the right. Governor Connolly will begin to turn his head to the right. Mrs. Kennedy begins to turn her head to the right. In the case of Mrs. Kennedy and Governor Connolly, these are all actions they said they did after the first shot. There was some discussion earlier that there's evidence of a shot striking President Kennedy in the throat from the front at around frame 180, 189, or in that area. I don't agree with that for different reasons. I don't see any evidence during these frames of President Kennedy reacting to anything. The only thing I see him doing is waving and then beginning to stop waving, and he begins to bring his hand down. Now, this is as Governor Connolly begins to come out from behind the sign, and I want you to notice the position of Governor Connolly's lapels, and this is the infamous lapel flap. The wound to Governor Connolly's chest, the exit wound, was at the right front of his chest below the nipple. These are the FBI lab worksheets on his clothing showing approximately where the wounds were, or I'm sorry, where the holes in the clothing were. And if you look at Governor Connolly, you can see his tie and you can see the white of his coat, or the white of his shirt, on both sides of the lapel of his coat. And if you also look right here, you can see what I believe is a portion of his right hand holding his Stetson hat. And in the very next frame, the lapel is suddenly pushed forward. And I don't think this is necessarily this portion of the lapel as opposed to the right front of the suit coat, or maybe a combination of the two. And notice that Governor Connolly's right hand is now out of view also. And then in the very next frame, the right hand is back in view. If I can back up one. Note here President Kennedy's hand. President Kennedy's hand is here. You can measure the distance from his shoulder to the top of his hand. And if you look in the next frame, you can see that distance has increased. His hand has dropped. I don't think he is yet responding to being hit, although I think they were both hit approximately a frame and a half before this. This is from the FBI reconstruction, the view from the window at that time, and you have a trajectory of 20 degrees downward. And I think you can, if you look at this, you can see Governor Connolly beginning to react, President Kennedy beginning to react. His arms are coming up. Governor Connolly, his arm has jumped up very rapidly. This is the hat flip motion, which has gotten some attention. His hat is right here in front of his chest. And this is frame 230. And I think if you look at frame 230, and if you compare Governor Connolly's right shoulder to the right shoulder of Agent Kellerman, the right shoulder of Mrs. Kennedy, and the horizontal axis of the limousine from right to left, you can see that Governor Connolly's shoulder is depressed. And I think his right hand is up holding that hat in a very unnatural position up here. I think he has been shot through the chest, through the wrist, into the thigh, and in reaction to that, he has raised that hand up and clamped it over his chest. And I think the following frames show Governor Connolly continuing to react. All right, this is frame 225. I think both men are hit by one shot about 1.5 frames before this, but you can't see President Kennedy in that frame because he's behind the sign. So what I've done is I've made an overlay of the body positions on here and then transferred this and sketched in the rest of the body, removed that. And you can see, I think, that if you line up the wound positions, you can accommodate a single bullet at this time. And this is a view that is parallel to the trajectory of the bullet. This is a view to the other side. And this is a section of section through Dealey Plaza with the drawing of both men laid here. And you can see that trajectory will run right back to the 6th floor window. In the horizontal view, I took a scale drawing of the limousine and very carefully positioned President Kennedy and Governor Connolly in the car using different photographs at the time of the assassination, different angle measurements, knowing from where Zapruder is. You can see I have President Kennedy to the extreme right side of the car. Governor Connolly is square on the jump seat. I mean, all these other, the NOVA and the House Committee consistently have him off the side of the jump seat. And when you line up all the wounds, you can see that this bullet can pass through both men in a straight line. And this trajectory is 8 degrees. I'm sorry? Whose hand? No, his hand is right here. I believe his hand is down in front of him, below the level of the line of sight from Zapruder to the limousine. And when you put this on a scale map of Dealey Plaza at the same frame, this trajectory will run right back to the 6th floor window depository. And this is the last slide. This is another drawing showing how one bullet can pass through both men at that angle. And I want to stress that angle, that 20-degree angle, is the angle that I got when I did the analysis on the F4 photograph. That was the last slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn.